I was struggling to bend over after back surgery, trying to put on my socks when my wife came into the room and said in disgust, "You're like a broken appliance, no use, just a burden." I said nothing. Then she grinned. "Sometimes I think I come home for nothing." I held back my anger and quietly replied, "I'll make it." Yesterday she realized how wrong she had been. You ever have a moment where someone says something so messed up that your brain kind of stalls? Like your ears hear it, but your mind just refuses? That happened to me about a month ago, and I still think about it more than I should. I'm Ryan. I'm 37. Been doing physical labor most of my life, moving, loading, hauling, lifting, you name it. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills, and I've always taken pride in being someone who gets the job done. That was until about 6 weeks ago when I messed up my back lifting a stacked toolbox the wrong way. Herniated disc. Pretty bad. The doctor said surgery was necessary, and even then recovery wouldn't be quick. So that's what I've been doing. Recovering. Slowly. Painfully. The first couple of weeks were brutal. I couldn't stand up straight, couldn't dress myself, couldn't make it to the bathroom without feeling like someone was stabbing a knife into my spine. It's the kind of pain that makes you question if you'll ever walk normally again, let alone work. My wife, Kendra, is 35. We've been married for 8 years. The kind of couple that made people say we were solid. And maybe we were, once. But something shifted when I got hurt. Like a switch flipped in her that I never saw coming. Anyway, about a month ago, I was sitting on the edge of the bed trying to put my socks on. It sounds simple, but when you've got a back injury, even reaching down feels like trying to wrestle an alligator. I had one of those hospital grabber tools, sweating bullets just trying to hook the damn sock, and I was gritting my teeth so hard I thought I'd crack one. That's when Kendra walked in. She stood there watching me struggle. No offer to help. No, "Hey, need a hand?" Just silence. Then, out of nowhere, she muttered, "You're like a broken appliance, just taking up space." I remember freezing. Just stopping. Did she really say that? I looked up at her, half expecting her to crack a grin or say she was joking. Dark humor or something. But no, her face was flat, maybe even irritated. Like I'd done something to inconvenience her by existing. When I didn't respond honestly, "What do you even say to something like that?" She added, "I don't even know why I bother coming home anymore." That's when something shifted in me. Not in an angry, screaming kind of way. More like something shut off. A quiet switch flipped. I smiled at her, a polite, fake kind of smile, and told her I'd be fine. But inside I was finished. Not with my life or my healing, just with pretending this was still a marriage. Truth is, things had been going downhill for a while. Once the paychecks became inconsistent after the injury, Kendra started changing. Little things. Eye rolls when I asked for help. Sighs when we talked about bills. Subtle digs about how she was the one keeping us afloat. I brushed it off at first. I was in pain, maybe reading too much into things. But that comment? That was different. That was honest. She wasn't slipping, she meant it. That day, after she left for work, I sat there with one sock halfway on, just staring at the wall. Thinking about how we got here. When did I stop being her partner and become something she barely tolerated? When did in sickness and in health turn into be useful or be invisible? Later that afternoon, my brother Elliot stopped by. He's always been the kind of guy who notices when something's off, and it didn't take him long to see that I wasn't okay. I told him everything. Every word. Every look. Every little thing I'd been swallowing for the last few weeks. He didn't sugarcoat it. "Dude," he said, "that's not just a rough patch. That's abuse. You wouldn't talk to your dog like that. Why is she talking to you like that?" He said it so plainly, so directly, that it hit me harder than I expected. Abuse? It sounded like such a big word. Dramatic. But the more we talked, the more it started to make sense. This wasn't the first cruel thing she'd said, just the clearest one. She'd been chipping away at me for weeks. Months even. The jokes about me being the weaker link. The comparisons to her friends' husbands who had real jobs and six-figure salaries. The times she sighed and said, "Maybe if you'd chosen a better career, we wouldn't be in this mess." It all clicked when Elliot asked me, "What would you say if Jenna, his wife, talked to me like that?" I didn't even hesitate. "I'd tell you to leave?" Exactly. That night, I made a quiet decision. I was done pretending. But I wasn't going to scream or argue. I wasn't even going to confront her, not yet. I was going to be smart. I downloaded a voice recorder app on my phone and kept it running whenever she came home. I don't know why I felt the need to document it, maybe for court, maybe just for myself. Proof. Validation that I wasn't crazy. I didn't have to wait long. The next evening, she came home from shopping, arms full of bags from high-end stores, which was strange considering how often she complained about our tight budget. I asked her politely if she could grab me a bottle of water. I just finished some light stretching for physical therapy and my body felt like it had run a marathon. She scoffed. God, it's like taking care of a child. At least kids grow up and stop needing you for everything. Got that one crystal clear? Over the next few days, I caught more. Her on the phone, telling a friend I was damaged goods. A comment about how any decent wife would have left by now. Gripes about how unfair it was that she had to carry the weight of 2 people. Every clip I recorded felt like another piece of armor. But it wasn't just the words. It was what I found next that pushed me into full reality check mode. One night, Kendra left her laptop open. I wasn't snooping, not really, just looking for an insurance form I needed. That's when I saw our joint bank statements. Turns out, while I'd been stressing over grocery bills and cutting back on pain meds to save money, she'd been transferring chunks of our emergency savings into a personal account. Spa days, designer clothes, brunches with her friends. Thousands of dollars gone. And I was sitting there feeling guilty for asking for a heating pad. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I called my mom. After I called my mom that night, I sat there on the couch for what felt like an hour, phone pressed to my chest, breathing slow. She didn't try to soften anything. That's not her way. She just listened, and when I finished telling her what I'd found on Kendra's laptop, she said, Ryan, this isn't just a cold spell. This is poison. And it's not going to get better. I already knew that. I think I'd known for weeks, maybe months. But hearing it from her, someone who doesn't deal in drama or exaggeration, somehow made it official. She gave me the number of a lawyer, a longtime friend of hers, and told me to just talk to him. Doesn't mean you're filing for divorce tomorrow, she said. It just means you're not walking into a gunfight with no armor. Fair enough. The next morning, my sister Jenna showed up unannounced with breakfast and a notebook. She's the kind who plans for every scenario, which honestly is exactly what I needed. We sat at my kitchen table going through every document I could dig up. Bank records, health insurance, old bills, emails. What we found made my stomach turn. Not only had Kendra been pulling money from our shared savings, she'd opened a new credit card in her name a few months ago. A big one. And she'd been using it for everything from $200 dinners to a weekend getaway in Aspen she claimed was for a work retreat. That same weekend, I'd been home alone trying to figure out how to shower without passing out. It got worse. She'd even moved a small but consistent amount of money out of the fund I'd set aside for my mom's assisted living. Just skimmed it off the top like it meant nothing. I could feel the blood rushing in my ears. My face was burning. She's been bleeding you dry while you're recovering, Jenna said. Flipping through screenshots she was organizing into folders. You've been worried about your pain meds being too expensive, and she's been dropping hundreds on handbags. I didn't cry. I didn't even speak for a while. Just stared down at the table and nodded. We backed up all the files to a private cloud account I set up. I wrote down every password. I redirected my disability payments to a new checking account with a bank Kendra didn't know about. Changed the mailing address for anything financial to my brother Elliot's house. I didn't want her getting wind of anything. Not until I was ready. The next day I called the lawyer. His name was Frank. Dry, professional, no nonsense. He asked a lot of questions. Some of them hurt to answer. I told him about the recordings, the financial mess, the manipulation. He asked if I had any physical injuries that could be attributed to abuse. I told him no, she never touched me. He nodded and said, emotional abuse is harder to prove, but the recordings help, especially in a one-party consent state like ours. He explained that, legally, what Kendra had done with the money might qualify as financial infidelity, which could work in my favor if things went to court. But he warned me not to go nuclear yet. Not to clear out the joint accounts, not to disappear. Just document, prepare, and be smart. So that's what I did. And while I was playing defense, I started quietly planning my own little counteroffensive, or, as Elliot later called it with a smirk, Operation Broken Tool. See, despite being physically wrecked, I was still the one handling most of the invisible work at home. I paid the bills, scheduled appointments, called the plumber when the water heater made that weird sound. I even kept track of our landlord's schedule because Kendra always forgot when rent was due. But I stopped. One thing at a time, I just let go of it all. When she asked what we were having for dinner, I told her I hadn't ordered anything. She laughed, half mean, half shocked. Can't even manage takeout? I just looked at her and said, guess not. Kind of broken, remember? The next morning, the drain in the shower clogged. Normally, I'd fix it with a snake tool in 10 minutes flat. Instead, I told her I couldn't bend down with my back. She had to go to her mom's house to shower. She came home fuming. I just smiled and asked how the water pressure was over there. Little by little, the gears started to jam. Groceries didn't show up. Trash didn't go out. Wi-Fi went down and stayed down. Her car started making that noise again, the one I usually got checked out before it got serious. Every time she complained, I just said the same thing. I'm damaged goods, remember? You said it yourself. She hated that, not because I was wrong, but because I was holding up a mirror she couldn't ignore. The real tipping point came one Sunday night when the toilet in our one and only bathroom backed up. She called me from the hallway, yelling that it was overflowing. I told her I couldn't help. I'd walked down to Elliot's to use his, since mine was obviously out of order. Then I turned off my phone and stayed there for the night. When I turned my phone back on the next morning, I had a dozen missed calls and several texts. A mix of anger and panic. I didn't answer any of them. Then came the confrontation. A few days later, she came storming through the front door early from work. Face red, her phone in hand. She held it up like a smoking gun. Why are the disability payments going into a different account? I stayed seated, calm. Because it's my name on them. My benefit. Just like the money you've been moving into your personal account. Her face changed then. It wasn't anger anymore, it was fear. She knew. She knew I knew. And that's when I realized I wasn't scared of her anymore. Not her moods. Not her silence. Not her passive-aggressive guilt trips. I'd been living with a woman who saw me as disposable, and I was finally taking myself off the shelf. After that last confrontation, when Kendra finally realized I'd been keeping tabs, that I wasn't just lying around like a helpless idiot, things got quiet. Not peaceful, just still. Like that moment before a thunderstorm hits. I went to my follow-up doctor's appointment 2 days later. My back was healing surprisingly well. The pain was still there, sure, but it wasn't as sharp. I mentioned that to the doctor and he nodded thoughtfully before asking if anything had changed at home. For the first time since my surgery, I told someone in the medical world the truth. I told him I was going through a lot of emotional stress, but I was starting to take control. He added a note to my file, potential emotional stress impacting recovery. Patient reports improvements since environmental change. That sentence would later become part of the evidence file my lawyer was compiling. Frank, the attorney, told me we were close. The documentation was solid, the voice recordings, the bank statements, screenshots, and now even a medical note connecting my environment to my health. He said I had a strong case not only for divorce but for protecting my assets, especially since I'd been vulnerable and financially exploited during recovery. We scheduled a formal filing date. That weekend, Kendra's car wouldn't start. It had been making weird noises for weeks. I used to be the one who handled stuff like that. She came stomping inside, slamming her keys on the counter. You could have told me something was wrong with the car. I didn't even flinch. I thought broken tools didn't get to weigh in on vehicle maintenance. She stared at me. No words. Just breathing hard, eyes wet but defiant. And in that moment, for the first time, I saw something new in her face. It wasn't anger or annoyance. It was shame. Of course, it didn't last. An hour later, she started in again how much she had sacrificed, how exhausting it was being the only adult in the relationship, how all her friends had partners who provided and she was stuck playing nursemaid to someone who chose a life of physical labor. And that was the moment. I reached into my pocket, took out my phone, and tapped play. I didn't say a word. Just let her hear it. First clip, her voice, bitter and sharp. God, it's like having a child. At least kids grow up and stop needing you for everything. Second clip, the shopping bag conversation. Other women would have walked away by now. Then, the final one. The one that broke something in me the first time I heard it. Sometimes I wish he hadn't woken up from that surgery. It would have been easier to collect the insurance and move on with someone who can actually be a man. Silence. The real kind, the kind that swallows a room whole. She went pale. Then red. Then pale again. Her mouth opened but nothing came out. She sat down on the arm of the couch, holding the edge like it was the only thing keeping her from falling over. I didn't mean it. I raised my hand. Don't. Just don't. What followed was the most honest conversation we'd had in months, maybe years. She said she resented being the one who worked while I lay around, that it made her feel like she'd married beneath her. She admitted she compared me to her friends' husbands constantly. She said the thought of being the breadwinner long-term terrified her. I was scared, she said. I said awful things because I felt trapped. I nodded. Let her talk. And when she was done, I said calmly, I've already filed for divorce. That landed harder than any recording. She blinked like the words didn't register. You, what? I've filed. The papers are drafted. My lawyer will serve you this week. You're serious? I've never been more serious. She didn't yell. She didn't throw things. She just stood there, quietly shaking, and eventually went to stay at her mom's. I spent the night alone for real this time, and I slept better than I had in months. The next day, I packed up her personal things. Not all her stuff, just her clothes, cosmetics, books, little decorative items she was attached to. I placed everything neatly into boxes and stored them in the garage. I left a note on the inside of the garage door. Kendra, I need space. Until things are legally settled, please stay with your mom. All communication should go through my attorney. Then I changed the locks. And the Wi-Fi password. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. When she came back that evening and saw the boxes, the note, and the locked door, she rang the bell like her life depended on it. She called my name over and over, pounding until her voice cracked. Then the insults came. Then the threats. And finally, the tears. I watched it all through the doorbell camera app on my phone from my brother's couch. I didn't feel anything. Not anger. Not guilt. Not even satisfaction. Just quiet. She blew up my phone that night. Dozens of texts. Some begging, some furious, some guilt-tripping. I didn't reply to any of them. My attorney had already advised me radio silence except through official channels. And honestly, it felt good. Not revenge. Not power. Just peace. For the first time in years, I was no longer trying to prove my worth to someone who saw me as less than. I was finally free. After I moved out and stayed at Elliot's for a few days, the messages from Kendra changed tone. Gone was the rage. Suddenly it was, hey, just checking in. How's your back today? I was thinking about our trip to Savannah. Remember that little cafe? I miss you. I miss us. Classic love bombing. I'd read about it online, but seeing it in action, from someone who'd told me she wished I'd died, was surreal. My therapist called it a manipulative cycle of abuse. I called it a waste of time. I didn't respond to any of it. Every voicemail, every message I saved. My attorney, Frank, was clear. Don't engage. Stay clean. Then the flying monkeys started showing up. First, it was her mother. Ryan, honey, you can't take everything she said seriously. She was just stressed. It wasn't personal. I told her gently but firmly that I had recordings, including the one where her daughter fantasized about cashing in on my life insurance. There was a pause, then silence. She didn't call again. Next came mutual friends, some genuinely confused. Others clearly fed Kendra's version of the story, how I'd abandoned her during a difficult time. I didn't explain myself one by one. Instead, I created a small private group chat, dropped in one message. I know there are rumors going around. I'm not going to argue or share details, but I'm safe, healing, and not alone. This wasn't a sudden decision. It was a long time coming. I appreciate your concern, but I won't be pulled into sides. Please respect that. Most did. A few didn't. I blocked the ones who kept pushing. About 3 weeks after I left, I got a message from Kendra's sister, Natalia. She was hosting a small dinner, hadn't realized what was going on, and invited both of us. Apparently, Kendra hadn't told her family anything about our separation. At first I thought about skipping it. Then I had another idea. I showed up 15 minutes late. Kendra was already there, sitting at the far end of the table like nothing was wrong. When I walked in, her face went pale. She smiled, that tight, fake one she used to reserve for customer service. Natalia hugged me, asked about my recovery. You look better, she said. Feeling better, I replied. And I meant it. Dinner was Awkward. Kendra kept trying to act like we were still a couple. Offering me food, asking if I needed a pillow for my back, brushing imaginary lint off my sleeve. Her sister and brother-in-law exchanged glances like something smelled off, but they couldn't figure out what. Eventually, someone asked how things were going between us. Before Kendra could speak, I answered calmly. We're getting divorced. Dead silence. Even the forks froze. Kendra jumped in with a performance that deserved an award. She said I was depressed, emotionally distant, that she'd done everything she could to support me. I've been blindsided, she said, her voice cracking. I still don't understand what I did wrong. That's when I took out my phone. I'm not here to argue, but I won't sit here and let my story be rewritten either. I played 3 recordings. Just 3. 1. You're like a broken appliance, just taking up space. 2. Other women would have left by now. I'm basically your nursemaid. 3. Sometimes I wish he hadn't woken up from that surgery. The silence was thick. Natalia's eyes filled with tears. Her husband, a quiet guy who worked in sound engineering, just shook his head. When the last clip ended, I said nothing. I put the phone down and took a sip of water. Was that really you? Natalia asked Kendra. They were taken out of context, she said weakly. Her brother-in-law looked at her and said, That's your voice. Nothing about that was out of context. I thanked them for dinner, said my goodbyes, and walked out. The next morning, my phone lit up with messages from her family. Turns out Kendra had broken down after I left. Confessed. Said she snapped under pressure. Blamed the money, the stress, her job, anything but herself. But they weren't buying it. Meanwhile, Frank filed the final paperwork. During mediation, Kendra showed up with a new, aggressive attorney. She came in swinging, wanted half of everything, claimed emotional distress, tried to paint me as irrational and vindictive. Then Frank played the recordings again, and showed the bank records, and the medical report noting psychological strain from the home environment. It was like watching her deflate in real time. By the end of the 4-hour session, she agreed to a settlement. I kept my full portion of our legal shared assets. No alimony either way, as she took full responsibility for the secret credit card debt, which by then had grown over $20,000. The judge signed the divorce a week later. 8 years of marriage ended in 10 minutes. I moved into a small apartment not far from my brother's place. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. Elevator, no stairs. Jenna helped me set up the kitchen, even stocked the fridge. Mom brought homemade meals for the freezer. No drama, no judgment, just support. Last week, I saw Kendra at the grocery store. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept well in days. She tried to start a conversation, asked how I was doing, said she missed me, said therapy was helping her see things clearly. I told her I hoped it was. That was it. No bitterness. No revenge speech. Just nothing. Like talking to a stranger I used to sit next to in high school. That night, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at her. Not at myself for staying so long. I was just free. My therapist says indifference is a healthy sign. It means the wound's healing. I'm not quite at forgiveness yet, and maybe I never will be. But I'm no longer carrying her voice in my head like a weight. 11 weeks post-surgery now. I'm swimming again. My physical therapist says I'm healing faster than expected. I can even bend down and tie my shoes. I laughed the other day watching a commercial for a smart appliance that did everything for the household, filtered water, tracked groceries, even texted you when something expired. It made me think of her words, "You're like a broken appliance." Funny thing is, I was the hardest working part of that house. I just didn't beep when I needed maintenance. Turns out I wasn't broken. I was overused, underappreciated, and finally unplugged.